Hi everyone, good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight as we look at where to travel in 2022. My name's Claire Irvin, I'm Head of Travel at the Telegraph. Welcome back to all of those who were with us last week, and also a big hello to anyone joining us for the first time. I've got to do a special shout out to Beverly, who's joining us without husband Kevin tonight. But diligently taking notes for him. So hi Beverly, thanks for your email earlier. There's also lots of people I can see coming on. Stephanie, Glennis, Andy, Anthea from Lymington. We've got people from London, Kevin from London, Andy from the US, and hi to everyone. Anyway, so we're picking up from last week. Last week we looked at how, alongside all that pent-up demand and excitement of borders opening, you can actually strategize your holiday booking. Look at what the pandemic means for your holiday. Now we can travel again in 2022, how you might want to protect your money, and how you can make sure you keep as much flexibility as possible, even as we're all popping our particular champagne corks and planning those new adventures. So which, of course, begs the big question, where to travel this year? So, I mean, of course, there are some certain uncertainties still remaining. Some major destinations, including some of Telegraph reader favourites, Australia, New Zealand and China, just as three examples, are still closed to tourism. Others are beset by rules and restrictions, but in general, those restrictions do seem to be easing. We've been covering on the desk, we've been covering test-free travel over the past few weeks and looking at all the different places you can go to, almost entirely faff-free. I mean, we can't even remember really what that feels like, can we? But it's true, there are some places. And indeed, in the UK, we seem to be ahead of the game, removing our own testing requirements for travellers. And the rumours are that Denmark is about to follow suit. So lots of good reasons to hope that this will become a growing trend. So without further ado, let me introduce my Telegraph colleagues joining me this evening. Firstly, we have Ben Ross, who's Deputy Head of Travel.
Hello.
And we also have Chief Consumer and Culture Editor, Nick Trent. Hi, Nick.
Hello.
So we thought, if we may, we might start by highlighting some of the places that we ourselves have enjoyed most during the last couple of years and why we think they might appeal to you too. So we've tried to give you quite a nice selection. And I think Ben is going to kick off with two Telegraph favourites in one, if I'm not mistaken, France and ski. Is that right, Ben?
Yes. On December the 25th, just before lockdown began in 2020, so this is December the 5th, 2019, I was skiing in Tignes in France, and it reminded me just how much. Oh my lord! Look at that. That's frightening. It reminded me, I think, that is the place I want to go immediately after the pandemic stops. So that's the thing I've been gearing up for the entire duration of these last 2 years. The last thing I did was be in Tignes, and the next thing I'm going to do is be in Tignes, and in terms of family holidays. So I have booked to travel in April. It's an amazing high resort, so you do get really good snow all season, and particularly late in the season. And I'm very much looking forward to going back there. I sort of feel, and I suppose it talks a little bit to what's been going on with France and the way the rules have changed. There was a huge opening of the floodgates, I think, a couple of weeks ago when France relaxed the rules in terms of British travellers getting there. And I'm afraid I was one of the people who was sort of pushing at the door and sort of demanding entry. So yeah, but my first stop will be France, high up, hopefully drinking some vin chaud and having an amazing time in Easter with my family, which should be very nice indeed. The other thing I thought I'd talk about at the moment is the Alps and indeed more central Europe in summer. I think it's something that's often unjustly neglected. People often just sort of reach for the beach in summer holidays. They think that the default setting should be lying on the shore. I think the mountains of Europe are a wonderful option. So something else that I'd really sort of strongly recommend, and this is something I was doing just prior to the pandemic as well. I spent some time cycling in Slovenia, going around Lake Bled, which was absolutely extraordinary. It's not a country I knew well. It was a wonderful experience. But I've done it before. I spent a lot of summers both in that region and in the Alps, and I do genuinely recommend it as a fantastic break. And I'm going to be doing it again. It feels as though it's got that slightly sort of I suppose, what's the word, isolated wonder that we might be after at this sort of time of travel. See, it feels like a relatively simple prospect as well. So I'm really looking forward to that. Thinking this time maybe Lake Constance, bit of Germany, possibly. Very exciting. And then the final thing I wanted to talk about that I think is a really interesting thing for people to be thinking about this year. Just before the pandemic, again, I went sailing, something that I'd never done before. I did it on a flotilla holiday. That literally is the boat that was next door to us while we were there. I'd never really experienced a holiday like it. It's like being on a caravan, but much more glamorous. No, caravanning is great, but in this particular instance, it rarely has the opportunity to dive off the edge of a caravan and be in beautiful Ionian waters. So that was absolutely amazing. It felt like it opened up a whole new avenue for me. And quietly during the pandemic, I've been learning to sail. So I'm hoping that the Mediterranean this summer will allow me to try my new hobby again with my family. That was the trip I did just before the pandemic was with the Nielsen, which I heartily recommend as a great operator for getting sort of families out and about and really sort of exploring a particularly new skill. And that's it from me. Those are my three.
When you say quietly learning to sail, in what sense do you mean quietly?
Well, I haven't been.
Presumably don't mean not talking about it.
I think I may have mentioned it to my colleagues Nick and Claire occasionally. But it's weird. You can actually go on a flotilla holiday like the one I was describing there, where you're basically sort of going around. You have a lead vessel and a bunch of boats who are following that lead vessel. You don't need a huge amount of sailing experience. It's basically a couple of days of just working out how you hoist a sail and that sort of thing. And then because there's a sort of external skipper, you're allowed to sort of wallow around in their wake. And flotilla holidays is brilliant because basically it's someone organising everything, and there's someone who can do the really crucial thing, which is parking a boat, which I had not realised was going to be quite so complicated as it is. And there's someone there sort of helping and dragging anchors up and down things, and it's all just very clever. Now I think I could do that all myself. It will be tremendous.
Yeah, you've got to get the phraseology right though, Ben. It's not the next door boat, it's the boat alongside.
Boat alongside, and it is parking. It is parking. It's not mooring, it's parking. Anyway, look, that's enough. I don't want no more abuse for my parking skills. Those are the three things that I think everyone should be doing this summer.
Right. Well, thank you. So my three kick off with the last place I went on holiday, which kind of almost against the spirit of how we're trying to travel now, which is as faff and restriction free as possible. Now that is possible. Bermuda was where I ended up in half term of last year. You can see here this amazing cave, underground cave that is just full of stalactites and stalagmites. It is one of the most, I'm claustrophobic, but I absolutely loved it. One of the most amazing natural phenomena I've ever seen. But yeah, so almost against everything, Bermuda had some of the strictest restrictions in terms of entry requirements possible. I was going with my family. And so that just quadrupled all the hassle. But it was one of those times where there were very few destinations, and I suddenly thought, we've never been to Bermuda, and I've heard lots of people talk about it, and so we almost ended up there by default. And my goodness, how glad am I that we went, because it was one of the best trips we've ever had. Now, this beach that you can see here was the beach accessed from my hotel, which was the Rosewood, and it was just the best beach we've ever been to, because every day was a different beach day. Like the tides, there were spring tides while we were there, and the waves were just different every day. One day the kids would be bodyboarding, the next day we'd all be jumping in and out of them, the next day it would be like a mill pond. It was just stunning. The water's just like unlike any that I've ever swum in before. It was just incredible. And there's many stereotypes about Bermuda, one of which is that it's very expensive, and indeed it was very expensive. At that point, we just felt that was worth it because we were away, we were in the sunshine, we were having a really lovely time. And, you know, rules about masks and stuff, as with so many places that people have visited, I think, you know, reports from places throughout the pandemic, actually, it didn't impede it at all. So there was just loads to do. The people were amazing, really good fun. And, you know, there were those beaches, and all around the island, just incredible beaches. So so that was Bermuda, and I'd highly recommend that to anyone for a holiday this year. Lots of multi-generational families out there enjoy, you know, grandparents with parents and kids as well, celebrating landmark birthdays or what have you. You know, obviously a very special place to go to, and really marking those. So so I'd really highly recommend that. But also another place we went to last year, again at the peak of their restrictions, honestly, as travel editor you think I'd know how to avoid them, but I seem to just embrace them last year. And we booked a holiday in Italy for late summer, and I kept thinking, indeed I was told, don't worry, restrictions will all have gone by the time the quarantine, 5-day quarantine. So as you arrived in Italy, wherever you were staying, you had to quarantine there for 5 days. And here we are, this is our amazing Truly in Puglia. We went with another family who we often holiday with, and there's lovely Francesco with his pizzas, came in to make us pizzas one night, because after this holiday, and I wrote a piece about it, I vowed actually I would try and quarantine during every holiday I ever went on afterwards, because that sense of not being able to leave, although it was Puglia and there were so many places we wanted to visit, actually having to stay put in one place, this beautiful building and gardens with friends, just meant we did what you meant to do on holiday, which was relax, eat too much, probably drink a bit too much as well. And it being Italy, quarantine meant, of course, we couldn't go out, but lots of people like Francesco could come in to see us. So we were able to have people come in and cook, which was a massive treat. But yeah, so we really managed to enjoy both sides of Italy, the people, you know, the weather and the scenery, and then eventually obviously we got to go out and about as well. And I know the Telegraph readers love Italy for good reason: the culture, the food, the wine, the people, and we loved all of those very much that last week in August. And then finally, just somewhere, I didn't go there during the pandemic, I went there a few years prior to that. My kids and my husband and I all here at a husky farm, and there was quite a lot of yellow snow as well as the white snow. But it was thinking about where we'd like to go again now. I think, you know, the kids are sort of, my daughter's reaching her teens. She is getting a bit older and beyond the Father Christmas magic. But it was just a magical holiday in terms of, and again, for multi-generations or families or couples, you know, there's just so much to completely captivate and just have your imaginations running wild. And, you know, the wildlife, even though we are actually staying at Santaland, but, you know, it was just absolutely magical, incredible. So I'd highly recommend that for a short break later this year, if your holiday and your budgets allow, after you've spent the rest of the year indulging your dreams. Nick, where are you dreaming of going back to?
Sorry, I was just answering Kevin about going to Japan in October, which I think is a lovely time to go when all the autumn colour is through. But we don't yet know when Japan's going to be open, so I think it's worth waiting for a few weeks. But I'll just go through quickly through mine, because I'm sure that the readers want us to come onto their stuff too. So I went to the most recent trip I've done is to Versailles, which I know is hardly an unknown destination, but I went there in September and there's literally almost no one there. That's the Hall of Mirrors there on the right. You can see completely deserted, and that's in the background there's the Orangery under the Great Terrace. And I just think this could, next year or this year now, could be a great time to go to some of these classic sites in Europe, because the Chinese won't be traveling, the Japanese won't be traveling, the Southeast Asians, probably not many Americans will be traveling either. And it's just a wonderful time to see these classic places without being completely inundated on tour groups. And I mean, the queues in Versailles to get in traditionally, go right back into the town square. So it's a great option. What's up next? Is it? I think Ravenna that was a new discovery for me. A really extraordinarily lovely Italian city, but exceptional because of its early Christian mosaics, which sound very dull when you put it like that, but when you see the extraordinary color and design and impact of these 4th, 5th, 6th century mosaics in about 5 or 6 different churches. This is the main cathedral in San Vitale, which was built at the same time as Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, and it is one of the great surviving ancient buildings in the world. And literally, it wasn't actually this. I walked into the mausoleum alongside it. When I walked in there for the first time, I literally staggered and had to hold on to a nearby chair because I was just so amazed. That sounds a bit like an overstatement, but really these buildings are utterly wonderful and relatively few people go there. And then if you're suffering from cultural overload, I had another sort of slightly staggering moment when I walked into a newly renovated hotel in Corfu, which I had quite low expectations for, to be honest. It's called the Domus Miramare. It's on the southeast coast of Corfu, and that's the view you get when you walk. You step in, you come in through the drive, and you don't realise quite how close you are to the sea, and you step into the foyer, and that's the view you get. And it was just a wonderfully straightforward, simple, quite comfortable. I think it's 5 stars, but nothing super special, but right by the beach, with those wonderful views over towards, I think it's probably Albania still there, isn't it? Those hills and those mountains in the distance, and just a lovely place to spend a few days. So that was a new discovery for me as well.
Fabulous, thank you. I'm just going to answer Joyce's question about COVID rules in Switzerland, because I'm actually here in Switzerland at the moment. And the good news is, Joyce, that Switzerland no longer requires a PCR test to enter. But caution should be taken because, as I discovered, to my horror, some hotels still require you to have a PCR test. So whilst BA hadn't realised that you didn't need to have a PCR test, and I managed to sort that out at the airport. Actually got to the hotel and they did require one, so I had to sort that out very quickly. The COVID rules in Switzerland, I think basically you, if you are double vaxxed, you can go into bars and restaurants and so on. There is a work from home rule here, which won't affect holiday makers, in place until the end of February. So we'll just have to keep an eye. If you're planning to visit here in May, one would hope that there'll be further relaxing if we take that precedent from last week in terms of changing the testing rules. But so let's move on to some pre-submitted questions. Rob asked about Costa Rica. Is it a good idea in February, and what COVID restrictions should we be aware of? Ben, would you like to pick that one up?
Yes, it is a good idea in February. It's one of those slightly complicated places where it's got 2 coasts, so there are lots of different weather systems that work. But certainly, this sort of time is a fantastic time to visit Costa Rica, and the travel entry requirements are quite good at the moment. You don't need to test to go to Costa Rica, but you do need to be double vaccinated. I think that's it for Costa Rica.
And we talked about China. Well, I talked about China in my introduction. When do we think that's going to be open? That's a big Telegraph favourite. What do you reckon, Nick?
Well, who knows? I think they've got to get through the Winter Olympics. They seem to be being incredibly focused on that at the moment. And then I think they've got to come to terms with the fact that they're going to have to let Omicron into the country, deal with that peak. I can't see it happening before the summer, and maybe the autumn. maybe not this year at all. I just think it's something, it's just worth waiting for a few weeks, possibly a few months yet before committing to a destination like that until we know a little bit more.
I think the other thing is they don't give the impression that they're necessarily going to give too much of a running commentary about what their intentions are in terms of opening. It does feel like quite a complicated destination to be trying to book at the moment.
Yeah, sure. Another favourite, of course, New Zealand, which I also mentioned. And Joyce has asked where is a good place to go for first-time motorhome trips abroad. And that New Zealand would be a classic destination, of course. Now, there's rumours that's going to reopen at the end of March. What do we know about that, Ben?
Well, there are rumours, but I don't think anything has been substantiated. There was quite a lot of discussion earlier this week from various spokespeople about New Zealand and their hope that they're going to gradually start to work to a point where they're working to live with the virus rather than pursuing a zero COVID strategy. I mean, as a place to go on a camper van trip, I can't think of anywhere better. I mean, it is absolutely wonderful and certainly something that I'd be saving my time up for. But do bear in mind that we're approaching the end of their summer season now anyway, so it would be something that you'd be looking for hopefully later in the year, I guess, if you are hoping to book for that. If you wanted an alternative, maybe it would be Canada. It feels like quite a good option this summer. But I spent a decent amount of time traveling around New Zealand, and my goodness, I'm really looking forward to our readers being able to go there again, because it really is just such an extraordinary destination and gives so much back. So, from a travel industry point of view, when New Zealand and Australia are back, that really will be a wonderful moment.
Yeah. And I mean, other destinations, of course, the US West Coast, another classic, and New England. If you're thinking of taking your own, you might want to stay a bit closer to home, France, Spain, Ireland, maybe. Nick says, please keep away from Norfolk. You do not like motorhomes in Norfolk, Nick?
No, I don't mind motorhomes in Norfolk. It's just we have a problem with them parking overnight without checking into campsites. But I don't want to get involved in that controversy on this forum. So cruising. Of course, there's been myriad changes to cruising over the pandemic. The thing that hasn't changed, I will say, is our readers' love of cruising. Clement has asked whether the Shorex's trips on shore need to be restricted to travelling together in a minibus, or can they go on foot? So I'm not sure if I know the answer to that. I would imagine if you're able to go on shore, it will depend on the restrictions of the destination you're docking in. I think that would depend exactly on where you were docking and also on the policy of the cruise liner. But I don't imagine they'll be restricted to minibuses in many cases. Thank you. If you can go ashore in a minibus, you'll be able to walk ashore as well. But who knows?
It's definitely the sort of information as well you'll be able to get from specific cruise operators. That's exactly what they're there to be able to help with. So definitely get in touch with the operator you're thinking of traveling with. Ask them about the rules for the particular shore excursions you're interested in. Yeah,
sure. So on to some family questions now. Caroline says, we're a family of 4, 2 teen boys, 14 and 16. We want relaxation, but also activity and sunshine and the coast. Any ideas? Also not too much money. Ben, 2 teen. Well, actually, both of you had teen boys. What can you advise?
They're a bit younger than mine, but Turkey. Coastal Turkey would be amazing. I mean, slightly expensive, honestly, Nielsen trips, but they are absolutely wonderful and would deliver all the things that you're asking for there. I think an active package holiday with TUI as well, that they deliver a lot of options in resort now in terms of getting people out on bicycles and exploring. It's the idea of sort of hunkering down in a package hotel and not moving anywhere is very much a thing of the past. So there's usually a lot of dynamic options there. I said Turkey at the beginning. I think I'd go back to Turkey. I would definitely be thinking about getting some coastal action in Turkey. The value will be amazing this year because the lira has had an awful time against the pound over the last year or so. It was noticeable when things relaxed a little bit during the pandemic that we all started to rush back to Turkey. And I think there's a reason for that. I think it's going to be the place that offers most value for British travellers this year.
I'd actually completely agree with that, and I would back up. I mean, Nielsen do these sort of they're like club holidays, really, aren't they?
Yeah.
And then you get access to dinghies and tennis courts and all that kind of stuff. And this was a few years ago, but it was a Nielsen holiday in Turkey, and I was a bit resistant to it at first, but we went when the kids were about that age, and they just had a ball, and you don't see them. It's wonderful.
Yeah. I think in terms of successful family holidays where everyone at the end of things was just looking incredibly happy and relaxed, that sort of holiday is almost the best kind.
And the food almost always in Turkey is
amazing. Yeah,
much better than Greece. He said controversial.
Quickly
big talk.
So Anurag would like to go to Israel this summer, and have we got any more guidance?
Well, I think Israel is one of those. It depends on what sort of holiday you want. I mean, in summer you probably wouldn't want to go for a beach holiday. The main resort's Eilat on the Red Sea, and it would be super hot then. But it's one of those extraordinary destinations which is sort of imprinted on our subconscious with all those names like Galilee and Jerusalem and Bethlehem and so on. But we very few of us ever go there. And I went there a few years ago, had a wonderful touring holiday, absolutely loved Jerusalem. It's an extraordinary city. Yeah. Tel Aviv is a very buzzy place. So I actually never made it up to Galilee, but I think I would like to go there and go to places like Nazareth and everything. But it's obviously, you need to be aware of the latest security situation, and you check that on the Foreign Office website. But it is a fascinating, overlooked destination. I would definitely recommend it for a probably shoulder season, spring or autumn on a touring holiday.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in? Alison is absolutely right. Nielsen have pulled out of Turkey. So although I don't change my view, though, I think a holiday in Turkey would offer you with tremendous value, and it would also be a suggestion for Danislava as well in terms of beach options this year. For families, doing a Turkey holiday, I think would be great. Roads. Again, possibly. I mean, you're in the centre of the Med, and you'd have that option as well. TUI do a nice beach resort complex in Rhodes, from memory, in the Greek island. So that might work as well.
Yeah, I'm just back to Israel. I mean, you'd need to check entry requirements, of course, current entry requirements, but you would also need the green pass that double vaccinated people with double vaccinations are eligible for.
I think they've just reopened to British tourists, haven't they? Actually, even today, I think it's one of those things. But I think we have to be hopeful and keep our fingers crossed that in 3, 4, 5 months' time, these things will be history. Yeah. I mean, who knows? But if you think back 3 or 4 or 5 months, everything's changed so much since then, and hopefully.
Well, we've seen, haven't we, a pattern of countries following other countries' leads throughout the whole of the pandemic. When everything was closing down, there would be a few countries that set things off, and then suddenly everyone else would follow. And it seems to have been the same with opening up and then closing down again. So let's hope these longer term reopenings will follow the same pattern. So Nick, just picking that, Elaine asked a question which kind of speaks to what you were saying about visiting European cities now when it's still quiet. She's asking whether we'd recommend a European city break before Easter, and as part of that question, when is the best time to visit Venice? Well, I mean, those sort of shoulder seasons are the best time anyway, aren't they? April, May, and November. So I don't know when Easter is this year. Actually, we should check that. But
I think it's April 17th. I think from memory is Easter Sunday. I mean, I just don't think you can lose at the moment, except of course that you will have to comply with the sort of restrictions and rules that you've been mentioning, Claire. But airfares, if you hunt around and look at airfares at the moment and can pick your days and your weeks, you can get extraordinary value, and the hotels will be biting your arm off. So why not? The one lesson I've learned over the pandemic is if you've got hopefully it's pretty much over now, but historically, if you've got a chance to travel, take it, because otherwise you might miss it. And if you've got a chance to travel at what are really incredibly low prices at the moment, then grab it. A lot depends on whether you mind the weather. I'm sure Ben would vote for Sevilla in March.
My favourite city on earth.
it's also wonderfully warm, and places like Palermo and Naples and everything. But Venice will be much chillier until about May, but then it's lovely. And if you want to put it off till later, then November is always very, very quiet.
Yeah, Venice, of course, is set to introduce turnstiles. We ran a story on that last week, didn't we? To try and, as one of the over-tourism measures that they're talking about bringing in, locals are railing against it. So in that sense, if you don't want to have to go through a turnstile to get to the centre of Venice, definitely go sooner rather than later.
Or just make sure you stay in the centre of Venice. That's the great thing about Venice, is if you stay there, the day trippers arrive at 10 and go home at 5, but it's much, much quieter. It's lovely to wander around in the evenings. Stay somewhere like Dorsoduro or near the Castello, near the Arsenale, and it's just like, well, there's not as many people living there as there used to, but it feels more like a local city than a tourist centre.
Yeah. And so another sort of cultural hotspot, Morocco, of a very different nature. Ian's asking, if you're thinking of visiting Morocco, should you opt for an escorted tour or kind of go it alone?
Well, it depends what sort of holiday you want. I think Marrakesh is a great city break. You could stay there for a week. You can almost treat it like a resort. Stay in one of the nicer hotels on the outskirts. Do excursions up into the Atlas Mountains. But if you wanted to really get under the skin of Morocco, then maybe go for an escorted tour and visit Tangier and Fez and Rabat even, and then end up and perhaps go out onto the Sahara Desert from a base in Marrakesh. There's really no problem in going solo, going independently, booking a package and staying in a hotel. But if you want a bit of a show round, then an escorted tour also works really well.
Yeah. S. Stewart has asked, if Christmas markets are on again this year, is Zagreb worth a visit? Now, I have to admit, none of us are experts on Zagreb, so none of us can speak from first-hand experience about this, I'm afraid. I love a Christmas market and firmly believe that you can there is not many other ways of getting quite so Christmassy, getting to the heart of the city, and sort of, really digging into a local Christmas experience than via a Christmas market. I think they have managed, whilst being very commercial, have managed to remain feeling relatively uncommercial. And it's just a really nice way of seeing all the local customs and handcrafts and what have you. And also just really magical way to see a city. So without having been, I'm going to hazard a guess and say that is worth going to. Anyone got anything else to add on that one?
My great advice would be to click the link in the side, which has a great piece on the world's best cities with Christmas markets, and then I won't even pretend I've been to Zagreb.
But I think you're right, Claire. It's a funny time of year to be talking about Christmas markets, really. But they're mostly locals who go. They're not all. I've been to Vienna during Christmas market time, and not many tourists go there for it's the locals who go along and have a chat and a glass of Glühwein and buy the Christmas tree decorations. And so it's actually quite a nice time to go. Extremely cold though. Don't go into a Christmas market without a hat and
and boots, because your feet get so cold standing around on. So got another family question from Jane, who is hoping for a family adventure for around 6 weeks in the summer holidays with 3 teenagers. What kind of once-in-a-lifetime family adventure would you suggest? And one of you's put Jordan, which I would absolutely second, but whose answer was that?
That was me, but I have to confess, I think the tour I did with the kids was about 10 days, so 6 weeks is quite a long time.
That's a long time, isn't it? Would it be a little hot in summer, I wonder?
Yeah, you'd need to go in the autumn or the spring, really.
Well, I think this is summer holidays, so let's think about that. I mean,
Canada again?
Yeah, I'm thinking of Canada this summer.
Big road trip with the kids. You'd be able to see lots of different things and stop off. You could start off on the west coast and look at Vancouver and move
Yeah,
rocky
I mean,
woods.
lots of the tour operators do very bespoke tours as well around Canada. We're looking, I know for a fact Scott Dunn, for example, have got some really great itineraries that you can kind of mix and match. And I mean, yeah, you know, massive open spaces, amazing wildlife. What an incredible, you know,
I
big
think
city.
it's also got the benefit, I think, of being like quite a supported adventure. You know, if you're going to spend 6 weeks
Yeah.
away from someone, it's good that you speak the language. It's good that you've got a bit of facility there that can help you out if things go wrong, if things are changing. It does feel like quite a nice option, I think, Canada.
Yeah.
Or California, maybe go and see
Yeah.
some of the big national parks and do that
Yeah.
road trip down from. Yeah, I mean,
All I can
6
say
weeks.
is
That's great. 6 weeks.
6 weeks would be amazing.
No, lucky you. That's what I was just going to say. 6 weeks, that'd be so amazing. On longer holidays, Terence has asked about advice on travel to Australia. I mean, it's the trip that keeps moving, isn't it?
I've just put in the notes actually that Australia is still shut to British tourists. So I think in terms of, I mean, the absolute hope, I think it is that Australia will open reasonably soon. But I don't think I would necessarily be jumping to book a holiday until I know more from the Australian authorities. So I'd maybe hold back a little bit. But again, as I said earlier about New Zealand, you'll probably be thinking about traveling there in October and November anyway, unless you're doing Western Australia. So yeah, leave that a little while before you book, I think.
Yeah,
they're very, very keen. The tourist industry is very keen to get us back, though. I mean,
yeah,
they've got so there may be even some incentives to get us over there, staying in hotels, hiring cars and things. So, but we're looking at next autumn, really, aren't we, Ben? I think for that.
For most of Australia, certainly, I think you'd be looking at that as your ideal time.
Yeah. Now, Alison's asked about where the unvaccinated can travel to outside of the UK. I mean, that's very difficult, isn't it? I mean, it is difficult to travel if you're unvaccinated. We have tried to give as much information as we can on what restrictions apply to each destination, particularly with restrictions being removed from any destinations. We're really, making sure that it's very clear to all of you what requirements are. So, I mean, I think the best advice is to look at destinations you want to go to and see what those.
Yeah, I've also included in the link a piece that we ran relatively recently, the 15 countries you can visit even if you're unvaccinated. So that would be a good first start. Obviously, make sure you're backing that piece up by looking at the FCO and individual countries' requirements because they will change.
Yeah, sure. There's somebody from Vancouver.
Mexico at the moment would be a good idea.
Well, Mexico, yeah. I mean, we ran a very big piece on that last week, restriction free. So yeah.
And also they don't ask for proof of vaccine status. So that adds an extra element.
Yeah. So Andy's asking about Iceland, first week of April. Good time to go?
Chilly. Depends how hard you are, Andy. I mean, it's an absolutely fabulous destination, but I might wait till a little bit later in the year if I were you. I remember driving to the airport from Reykjavik, which is along quite an exposed road, in August, and it felt like December in the Alps. You know, I mean, it can. So you could be really lucky, but if you're going to go all that way and spend that money, I would just probably leave it a little bit later. But I wouldn't miss it for the world. It's just a fascinating place and definitely worth doing a circumlocution of the whole island. It's some wonderful things to see there.
Yeah. Fazilat, I hope I've pronounced that properly, asks where we would recommend with young children in summer. Well, I mean, there's just so many amazing places in Europe. I talked about Puglia, but I mean, Balearic's really great for kids. I was in Ibiza last year, and it really does feel like, there is still an element of Ibiza that's party island, but actually it's really giving over to families now, and it's just become this really amazingly family-friendly destination. What
I
about?
put in the queue a bit. I was banging on about the Alps again and suggested Austria, which I think is particularly for young children would be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
You've got the Canary Islands as well, key destination during summer, and certainly for younger travellers, that's all right. There are still some issues in terms of proving vaccination for older kids. But if you've got, I think Tasmat said that his child was 5, so that should be absolutely fine for that. Canary Islands, all the Balearics would be lovely. Balearics very, very hot in summer.
Yeah.
So just be aware your child will have to be happy with that sort of temperature.
Yeah. Okay. And so we've talked about Switzerland, we've talked about Austria. Oh, what about solo travellers? That's a really good question. So many solo travellers amongst our readership. So what advice have we got? Recommendations?
I think solo travel is an interesting thing. Are you traveling for the destination, or are you traveling because you want to be on your own, or because you want to meet people? It's such a broad concept. I always think that a good compromise is to go with on a cultural tour with an operator like Martin Randall, for example. Choose a theme that you're interested in. You're bound to meet like-minded people there. If you don't want to join in and you prefer to be on your own, you can always do that. But those escorted cultural tours, or even a bigger one on a coach, if you prefer that, a bigger mix of people. More than half usually of people who go on those tours are traveling solo, either because they want to, or because they have to because of home circumstances, whatever. But I just think that it's always good to think about what you like to do and where you like to go, and find a way of meeting people while you're doing it.
I think I'd maybe add that it don't have to be cultural tours. I mean, people like Explore or there are a decent number of operators that will make sure you can do whatever you want there. But it is that paradox, isn't there, that in a way a solo traveller can just as much be a traveller who wants to be engaged and talking to as many people as possible. But almost all the operators will have good solo programs. Trailfinders deliver as well. So to choose your destination, as Nick says, and then find out how you want to explore it. But I think an escorted tour would be a tremendous way.
And walking tours, as you say, is another really good one. It doesn't
exactly.
It's just
Ramblers worldwide.
Petra's asked about when is a good time to travel to Bermuda. Well, I went in October, Petra, which is just at the end of their peak season, and the temperature was amazing. I think May to October generally the best time, but you'll get the best deals March to April when it's still great weather, but not quite as hot, but definitely not as busy.
It's not quite a winter sun destination, is it, Claire? It's just a little bit. Is that right?
Yeah, it's not Caribbean, so it's
no,
further north than you expect it to be.
North, yeah. So, oh yes, sorry, and Ben had actually answered that. Sorry.
I wanted to tell you all about the Bermuda shorts I wore. They were tremendous. Lovely red number, long socks, and a matching blazer. I blended in perfectly during my stay there. Nick looks pained.
Is Mauritius welcoming the British?
I think I've answered that as well. I think fully vaxxed is fine. I've put a link in there just to make sure that you look at the FCO advice before you go, as far as I'm aware.
Right. Okay. I'm trying to now beat Ben in terms of what he hasn't answered, and Nick, in fact. So, yeah.
There's one there about hotel prices in Florida. Have you? He says that Martin says that hotel prices in Florida for this November are 2 to 3 times the price they were in November 2019. Should I wait till later in the year? That sounds extraordinary, but I would definitely wait if I were you. I wonder if they may come down quite a lot. It seems unsustainable that they're that much more expensive than pre-pandemic prices.
It's maybe. I'm just wondering if
though, haven't they? I mean, I've had so many questions about this over the last few weeks. People saying they've been trying to rebook holidays they'd cancelled and finding they are literally double the price. I mean, particularly to the Caribbean.
And Florida, I guess, is almost a sort of a first choice destination in terms of opening the doors to the US. That's going to be where people are going to be piling into first. And they don't have a mask mandate for children indoors and things like that. I suspect it could just well be just enormously popular at the moment.
Although November is really quite low season.
Yeah, you'd have thought, wouldn't you?
That sounds unusual, but I would keep an eye on it. I wouldn't pile in at that price anyway.
Too many snowbirds coming down from New York, maybe.
Yeah. What about Botswana? And Claire, somewhere here, has booked a holiday, cancelled from 2020 and then again in 2021. What are her chances of being able to go this year?
Hopefully better than
in
2020 and 2021. If things don't get back to normal this year, then we're in even more uncharted territory. I would keep my fingers crossed and be optimistic about it.
Yeah. Well, I think that concludes, seeing as you two have been so quick on the buzzer and answered most of the questions anyway. I didn't know it's a competition, otherwise I might have done the same too. Thank you both anyway for joining me and sharing your wisdom and your inspiration. And thank you to everybody who's joined us tonight, asked questions and given us feedback. All that's left is to wish you a wonderful getaway this year or more, and do keep us posted and let us know how you get on and where you choose to go. Have a lovely evening.
Bye.